Welcome, everyone. I'm Peter.
I'm John.
And we are the RV Geeks, and also we are the co-hosts and co-executive producers of the Discovery Channel and PBS television show, The RVers. I'd like to introduce everyone who's here with us today, and sitting alongside us here, as you expected if you saw the publicity for this, is Don Wilson, the Xantrex application engineer. Don, could you say hi to everybody and just real quick, make sure your mic works and everybody can hear you.
Hello and welcome. I'm glad to have you here.
Where are you coming from, Don? Where are you located?
I am in Elkhart, Indiana, the RV capital of the world.
That is RV Central.
Awesome.
Right.
Awesome. We're also joined, who I believe is sitting directly beneath us, Wesley Schuin, who's the product manager from Xantrex in charge of their solar program. Welcome, Wesley.
Hi, guys. I'm excited to be here today. I'm the product manager for the Xantrex solar program and happy to answer any questions on that. I'm located in Vancouver, BC, Canada. That's the Xantrex headquarters.
Awesome.
Excellent.
And Adam McLaughlin is sitting down in the other square diagonally down below us. And for those of you who haven't seen, Adam is the online face of the RVers television show. He and his wife, Celine, and their 3 boys are fellow full-time RVers, better known as the RVers family. And they handle the social media side of the RVers TV show. And Adam does online videos. If you haven't seen their YouTube channel and their Instagram posts and on Facebook, look for the RVers TV or the RVers family, right, Adam?
That's right.
And Adam will be moderating tonight's live and
Yes.
feeding in questions from all over the internet.
Yeah, so the reason that Adam is with us particularly tonight is he has considerable experience doing what we are doing here today, which is moderating a live online chat from multiple locations, feeding out to multiple locations. And Adam is going to be taking your questions online today. We've received many questions in advance, but during the time we're here today, over the next hour, Adam is going to be moderating your questions on Facebook and on YouTube, and he's going to feed them to the rest of us to answer and be kind of our liaison between you and us. So thank you, Adam, very much for doing
It's
that.
going to hurt us cats.
Well, I'm going to do my best, and I'm not going to make any promises that I can get you guys under control at all. So please don't hold me to that. But as you're watching tonight, if you have a question, please go ahead and leave it in the comments. I do see some questions coming in both from YouTube and Facebook. And so thank you very much for those questions. We're going to get to as many as we can tonight. And we also had some questions that came in ahead of time. So one of the first questions that came in was, see, I've got my script now.
While you're looking at your script, I'm going to mention, Adam, that you and I were neglectful in not mentioning where we are. Adam is in Ontario,
Yes.
Canada, and we are in British Columbia, Canada.
Not
Yes.
far from Vancouver, so we're not far from Wes.
I apologize for that. The first question that came in is from John, and that came in on YouTube. And the question is for Don. How have you seen solar panels evolve to becoming more efficient?
Okay, yeah. So there's a couple of technologies that have come out in the past few years. You know, in the early days of solar was a great idea, but you needed so much square footage just to get any kind of real energy in. There's 2 technologies that have changed that. First is the monocrystalline panels rather than the polycrystalline panels, and you can tell those by looking at them. The monocrystalline are typically more black, where the polycrystalline have kind of that mother of pearl iridescent look to them. It's that literally sliced from a chunk of silicon, and so it allows more energy to pass through. The second is the PERC cells, and those are kind of interesting because there's a bottom layer at the bottom of the panel that allows energy to hit that bottom layer and bounce back, and so it gives that wafer another shot at grabbing some energy. And we've gotten to the point where you can realistically, on a very large RV, go fully autonomous on solar panels, depending on your usage and things like that, where 20 years ago that just wasn't realistic.
Luckily, the larger the RV, the more power it uses, the more roof space there is for solar panels. We'll, of course, put a link later on down below to our solar panel installation that shows that we have 1,300 watts up there of Xantrex solar.
So John also asked, our John. How often do you clean the solar panels, and what kind of information do you get from the solar controllers and battery monitors?
Well, I usually do the cleaning.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't clean them at all, which is really the best scenario.
So I'll answer the first half of that. I clean them plenty often. There's just the idea about dirty solar panels leaving power on the table strikes me as wrong. So I get up there, I clean them either with a California duster, which we use to clean the paint job, or I'll get up there and clean them with a damp cloth or even a mild, window cleaner.
Mm-hmm. And then as far as the information that we actually get it from two different places. So our Xantrex solar charge controllers feed their information into our COM box, which is a device that connects all of the Xantrex components into our local network, so we can actually get that data. And I can monitor basically all of the output, what the solar panels are doing, what the MPPT charge controllers are actually putting out as a result of that solar load, and then can monitor all of the other loads as well. So we get a fairly detailed view into what's going on. It's way more information than we need. We totally geek out on watching it. We were literally just watching it yesterday while we were on doing a test and watching all of the solar come in. But it gives us all that. And then we also have the eGen monitor, which is the monitor panel directly from the lithium battery itself. And that shows us our actual net flow of power in and out of the battery. So it gives us the ultimate view, because in reality, that's what we're actually after, is recharging our battery during the day.
So Wes, we had a question come in about your flex solar panels. Maybe you could talk a little bit about those, specifically how they might work on a roof that might not be flat, like an Airstream.
Yeah, so flexible panels are designed exactly for that, for slightly curved surfaces. Obviously, they can't bend in half, but you can bend. Our flexible panels can bend 30 degrees, and so yeah, that's exactly an advantage of having flexible panels as opposed to rigid panels for those curved surfaces. And so we wanted to offer both to cover a broad range of installation services, especially on an RV where there's very limited space to install solar. Yeah.
So does the flex versus what we might think of as a solid panel, does that change the output or the amount of sun or the amount of energy it creates?
No, I mean, like if you take a 100-watt flexible panel and a 100-watt rigid panel, they perform, the rated output's 100 watts. And certainly I would, one advantage of rigid panels is that there is airflow underneath that allows the solar panel to operate at a cooler temperature. And solar panels that operate at a cooler temperature produce more power output. Flexible panels, which are typically flush mounted against the surface, they can generate a lot of heat, and that heat will decrease the performance of the solar panel. So it's a consideration, and it's one of those, again, pros and cons with flexible panels and your standard glass or rigid panels. But certainly that would be one performance difference between rigid and semi-flexible.
And we can actually talk to that a little bit, because our 1300-watt system is split pretty much 50-50 between the two. So we have half of our panels being rigid and half of them being flexible. And we can see that slight difference in performance on a full, hot, sunny day with the rigid panels putting out just slightly more power than their flex component, their flex compatible ones.
There really are pros and cons of both. So having half of our system flexible panels that are stuck to the roof and half being rigid up above the roof, one other difference is that we can tilt our rigid panels, which we do. They're on electromechanical tilt kits. And that means that when the sun is very low in the sky, especially during the winter when the sun doesn't rise high, those panels can be tilted up to face the sun more directly. So it's interesting that we see a difference on days that are hot or breezy. So if it's a cool day out, all the panels will perform more similarly. If it's a very hot day out, the rigid panels, having that little bit of airflow underneath, will perform a little better. If it's breezy out and there's some airflow around them, they'll perform a little better. But another upside of the flexible panels, there are no holes to be drilled to put them on the roof. The installation is amazingly simple, peel and stick. Yeah. And also that keeps them completely out of sight from the ground also. You can't even see from the ground that we have those flexible panels at all.
and again, sorry, just to keep going with that same topic, the other advantage we found with the flexibles, of course, is the weight. So they're significantly lighter than a rigid panel of equal output. So if you have a weight issue in your RV and don't have the capacity on your axles to support additional weight, then the flexibles can give you a little bit more room to either have more power or to even just have solar at all.
Here's an out-of-box reason to use the flexible panels. I actually had an RV technician when I was doing some training come to me and did tell me what a great idea it was. If you have a rubber roof on your RV and you have a tear, you can spend 10 grand on a rubber roof, or you can steal and stick some solar panels on there.
That is out of the box thinking.
That is a fantastic idea. You talk about turning the prism on a problem. I love that.
Bob from Facebook is asking about the longevity of the flexible panels and how well they work as you're, going down the road and then also Dennis from YouTube is asking a similar question. Does the adhesive eventually give out in the heat or with movement?
That sounds like a question for Wes.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me answer the first question, the durability of flexible panels. Absolutely. Semi-flexible panels are nowhere near as durable as rigid panels. Rigid panels have been used in the industry for many years. They supposedly last 25 to 30 years. Semi-flexible panels are not, anywhere from 2 to 5 years, depending on the technology used. And that's just because of the nature of being flexible, and you can, bend it. It's just not as durable. In an RV environment, you could, things that could crack the cell are, environmental conditions like hail, rocks that are kicked up from the road, low-hanging tree branches. Obviously, if you step on a flexible panel, the cells will crack. And cracked cells will definitely lead to reduced power output. So whereas a glass panel has a heavy-duty anodized aluminum frame with a strong glass front sheet, and that protects the panel from a lot of damage. So we've tested our solar panels, and certainly rigid panels are much more durable than the flexible panels. So that's one of those pros and cons.
Yeah. One thing we've noticed, Wes, particularly, so we've seen what are typically thought of as flexible panels for many, many years. And one of the reasons we opted to go with half of our system, and I hesitate to call I like the fact that you referred to the Xantrex panels as semi-rigid. That's normally what we call them. And we saw the thickness and the robust design that Xantrex has gone with, different than others we've seen that are really flexible, flimsy, that you could literally roll up like into a tube. These panels are so much thicker than we've seen before, and it looks like what's been done by Xantrex was make them far more robust, which is one of the reasons we decided to split our system and use half of them as semi-flexible.
If I could jump in on that as well, one of the other things that's a real benefit with our flexible panels that you don't see in a lot of the other panels is that, what makes a solar panel typically go bad is the copper bus bars, those stripes you see on the solar panel. As the panel gets hot and cold and hot and cold, they'll crack and they'll get these micro cracks in them. One of the features that ours has is the bus bars are wavy, and it's done so that it works like a spring as it stretches and contracts. So we've designed them to last longer in their normal use.
We've seen people who have shown the installation of flexible panels that you can walk on them. And when we showed in our video that we had put those up, we showed it says no step right on them. And we made clear in that no matter what anybody says, there are no flexible panels that are designed to be walked on. And by the same token, no one can walk on their rigid panels either. They should not be walked on at all. So that shouldn't be a factor.
So if you would like to see Peter and John's solar setup, then you're going to want to tune into the RV Geeks on Discovery Channel, 8 a.m. Eastern on June 13th.
The RVers.
The RVers. Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. We appreciate
that. You'll be able to see all of the Xantrex setup that the RV Geeks have put on top of their rig. So that's Discovery Channel, June 13th, 8 a.m. Eastern, and it's obviously different in different time zones, 7 a.m. Central, and then there is a Pacific playing of Discovery Channel. So just check Discovery Channel June 13th for that show. And the next question we have is for Don. And Don, this question comes from Lewis on YouTube, and he's asking about using his 230 volt Freedom SW3524 with 110 volt AC input. So can you tell us what those numbers mean?
Sure. So the 230 volt input is basically a European inverter. It's what we call our international inverter. So it's 230 volts at 60 hertz. And so, the question, can you use 120 volts to feed its input? No, because it's intended to be used in a 230 volt system. 120 volts would be considered low voltage. Like if you were to try to feed a US inverter with 60 volts, it just won't take it. It considers it too low.
That one, we saw that and we're like, no.
Well, Don, here's another question. This one comes from Chris on YouTube. And he says, much has been made about the MPPT charge controllers and the PWM charge controllers. What's the difference? Which one should I use? And a question from Adam, what do those things mean?
Okay, so PWM it stands for pulse width modulated, and what that means is, in fact, I have a graphic if I can use this. The solar panels typically put out about 19 volts. Your battery wants 14 volts to charge. Okay, so how do we get that 19 volts down to 14 volts? Well, the PWM, or the pulse width modulated, the more current that we need to push, the wider the pulse width gets when you look at a pulse like this, if you can see that. So you turn on to 19 volts and turn off to 0 volts and turn on to 19 volts and turn off to 0 volts. And once you filter that out, you end up with 14 volts. The problem with the PWMs, let me start with the benefits. Benefits are they're less expensive. They're very easy to make. The downside is you're turning off some of the time. And so you've got good sun, you've got good solar panels, but you've got portions of time that the power is turned off to the battery. And so you typically lose about 35% of your energy through a pulse width modulated solar controller. The MPPT stands for maximum power point tracking. And all that means is it will take the voltage it sees from the solar panel, and it'll start to draw current until the solar panel starts to struggle. And then that's its maximum power point. And it's going to take that, chop it up into a bunch of different sections, and feed it back out at 14 volts using a DC to DC converter. And so those are, you typically only lose about 3 to 4% of your energy. So you're getting much more power from your solar panels into your batteries in exchange for the cost of an MPPT. They're more expensive. The other benefit is of an MPPT is, while a pulse width modulated solar controller really needs the solar panels to be about the same voltage as the battery, you're not going to see them over 24 volts feeding the inputs of these controllers. With the MPPTs, a lot of them you can feed 100 volts, 150 volts. You can take your solar panels and run them in series, bring that high voltage into the controller, and the controller will use what it can get. Two benefits to that is, one, your wire size can be much smaller, so you can get a lot more power because your current drops. You're raising the voltage, you're dropping the amperage, and the amperage is what determines how big your wires are. The second is low angle sun. So if you have 19 volt solar panels and your 19 volts is going into your controller, and you're at a low angle, so your solar panels can only put out 8 volts each, your controller is not going to do anything with it. But if you're running in series and each panel is putting out 8 volts, now you can, if you've got 10 panels, you got 80 volts, and the MPPT can use that. You're still not getting a lot of current, but you're getting something. And so MPPTs, the downside is they're more expensive. The upside is you get a lot more actual power into your battery.
And just from our standpoint, we have twin MPPT controllers, and I would say, Don and Wes, maybe you could just say yay or nay. It's a pretty standard thing that if you are building a high-end system, you are going to use MPPT, not PWM, correct?
Yeah. And frankly, there's, one of the things that we talk about when we size solar panels is some people say, well, I want to go with 3 solar panels and I want to use a controller and I think the PWM is fine. Great, do that. And if later on down the road you say, I need more power, you have a choice to make. You can either add another panel and keep your controller and get that added energy, or upgrade your controller to an MPPT, keep your same panels and just rewire them in series, and you'll get an automatic boost that way.
So a follow-up question to that is from Drew, and this question comes from the RVgeeks.com. Drew asks for Don about both those charge controllers. He has a medium-sized system of 600 to 700 watts made up of 4 or 5 panels. Which of those controllers would you suggest for that specific system?
I'm always going to suggest the MPPT because I'm a power hungry guy. I want to get everything I can get. I don't like the idea that a piece of electronics is going to leave 35% of my energy out in the wind. So I would go with the MPPT. You know, if you went back 5-6 years, MPPTs were double or triple the cost of a PWM. Today it's about 50% premium, 70% premium, so the costs are narrowing. I would definitely go forward thinking and just drop in with the MPPT and get everything you can get.
And one thing I would also chime in on that too, the part of the answer may be what your future plans are as well. So if you're planning on just sticking with the solar panels you have, that may be one decision. But if you have expectations that you're going to want to expand your system, now might be the time to get the larger, more capable MPPT charge controller. And so you're future-proofing your system for adding more panels later. There you go.
So is there a way to check your solar panel output without a meter? Dick is asking on Facebook.
Lick the terminals.
9-volt battery. No, don't do that.
Don't do that.
No, that's 19 volts out of there. That'll give you a good buzz. So, you know, there's all kinds of MacGyver ways to do things. So if I were looking for a way to test if my solar panel is putting out power, if you're dealing with a 100-watt solar panel, get an automotive light bulb, like a brake light bulb, and test it as a test light. 19 volts will power a brake light bulb without damaging the bulb, and if it lights up, your solar panel is putting out power.
Perfect. There you go, Dick. There's your question.
Sandy MacGyver answer,
I should say. This question is from Stanley from YouTube for Peter and John. And Stanley says, please describe a system to keep my 224 DC and chassis battery charged via solar boondock, but I just want the batteries always charged when I'm not connected to shore power.
Okay, so that would be a pretty small system that you would need for something like that, because basically you're just talking about keeping up with mostly parasitic drains if you're not actually boondocking and using power while you're out there, lights, your inverter.
Yeah, you're primarily trickle charging the batteries. Now, lots of RVs come when it's very common, like this 43-foot motorhome that we have that we bought 15 years ago came with a solar panel. It's a 1-foot square panel that doesn't really do much of anything. It was designed to trickle charge.
It lights a light up on the dash.
Yeah, there's a red light on the dash that says it's getting power, and I think that's the amount of power it provides for that little red light. If you had a 100-watt panel?
Well, again, it would depend. If you're specifically talking just about keeping up with parasitic drain while you're in storage, then yeah, you could easily get away with a single 100-watt panel.
Probably.
Maybe 200 watts. If you're actually using your RV and traveling with a little bit more, you're going to need a little bit more power, and you may want to just plan for a larger charge controller in order to be able to plan for that expansion.
Some of it depends.
Don or Wes, if you want to chime in, we operate on a 12-volt system, so I don't know what would be different about specifically targeting a 24-volt battery system.
The difficulty in the 24-volt battery system is you're going to want voltage into the solar controller to be higher than the voltage coming out. So you're going to end up with 3 panels in series at the minimum, but using an MPPT or something like that to bring it down. But
most people don't have 24-volt systems in general.
No, but that was the next question. Yeah,
12 is certainly much more common. But I see that Stanley's saying he's got 2 24-volt DC. So in his case, he's going to need more.
Yeah, so if you're just wanting to maintain, it's not going to be a lot. It's going to be less than 100 amps if you're just looking to maintain your parasitic loads. Look at what your loads are, or look at how much draw you're getting out of your battery in amps. Multiply that by 24 to get your wattage, and then double that, and that's how many watts of solar panel you're going to need. And I say double it because the sun goes down, and you're going to get some losses and things like that. So,
yeah, maybe I just can add to that. What Don's referring to is basically oversizing your solar array to account for cloudy days. Your solar panels are not tilted. They're performing at hot temperatures. So there's many factors that decrease the performance of a solar panel. So by oversizing it, it's actually a very smart way to maximize the output of your MPP charge controller.
Right.
So Stanley's clarifying on Facebook, he didn't mean a 24-volt system. He was meaning a 24 size deep cycle. Does that change the answer?
So he has a 12-volt system.
Okay.
So exactly what I said, but take your amperage and multiply it by 12, and that'll give you your wattage, double that. And what Wesley was talking about, really, I can't stress that enough. As an applications engineer, we put systems together, and then people get disappointed, and the math doesn't work. I've got, I got 300 amps of solar. I should have 300 amps or 300 watts of solar. Excuse me. I should have 300 watts going into my battery all the time, and you really need to oversize.
So somebody's asking about investing in a system, but they're thinking they could save some costs by not using lithium. Is it worth investing in a system to go to a different type of battery?
That's an easy one. Wes, you want to hit that one?
Sorry, I actually didn't hear it. Can you repeat the question?
Go ahead.
Well, the question is it worth investing in a system if you're not going to be using lithium batteries, or you're going to use a different type of battery to save some cost there?
Investing in solar. If you're not using lithium, right?
Yes.
That's the question. Yeah, absolutely. It is really, whether you use lithium or lead acid, that's your energy storage capacity. Lithium obviously is more energy dense than lead acid, and you can discharge it to like 90% as opposed to lead acid, which is typically 50%. And so if you're just looking for a small system to maintain your battery, just to keep the batteries topped off from those parasitic loads, then yeah, absolutely, it's worth investing in a small solar system. Maybe 100 watts, 50 watts, 100 watts. And you're probably not looking to, if you're on a budget, looking to probably get a PWM charge controller, because the MPPT is probably not, it's not just worth justifying the price of an MPPT for such a small system.
Yeah. Now, and I would say this, that solar has been on the market far longer than lithium batteries have. Mm-hmm. And we've all had solar out here. We have been on the road now for 17 years, and we have had solar the entire time, and we only have a lithium battery as of the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. And it's something that the main reason we think there is to invest in solar, and I did happen to see a comment come in down the line about, will solar pay for itself? And we always tell people that solar is not a financial investment, it is a quality of life investment. Mm. And that if you're looking to spend X number of dollars on solar, or batteries. And your question is, what is the calculation to determine when I will recoup my investment? You'll recoup your investment the very first day in quality of life by not running your generator so much. And will you get back the money you spent by saving it on paying for electricity or diesel or whatever to run your generator? Maybe not.
Well, and again, that also goes into what is your RVing lifestyle like? So if you are a resort person and you like being plugged in and having a pool and a hot tub and all the amenities that come with being in a resort, then chances are you're never going to recoup your solar investment because you're never off the cord. So if you want to dry camp a lot and be out in the wilderness and not be paying for an RV park, maybe staying on BLM, then you can actually start looking at that as possibly being a cost-effective means of basically shifting your expenditure from paying to be in an RV park to paying for solar so that you don't have to be in an RV park.
That's where the biggest savings comes in, really. If you want to look at faster money savings, it's not saving on the amount of fuel you'd burn to run your generator. It's saving.
Although that's a factor.
It is a factor. It's the biggest savings comes from being able to stay in free places off the grid. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the biggest misunderstandings about solar and large battery banks. We were in an RV resort for a few days over this past winter, and the person next to us, who was obviously set up there for the entire winter, saw our solar bank and said, I've been thinking about getting some solar and maybe getting myself some lithium batteries that I've heard a lot about. How much should I get? And we said, well, you're here in a luxury resort. Are you here for the whole winter? And he said, yep.
Do it every year.
And I said, do you do any boondocking? And he said, I've heard about that and thought about that before. Maybe I should try that. And we both said to him simultaneously, don't spend any money on solar or lithium. You don't need it. Save your money. And his wife, who was listening, and she's like,
She was very happy.
She was very happy. Because most of the time, John and I cost people money by telling them about great stuff. This time, we save them some money.
If you don't mind, I'd like to put it. I mean, I realize this is a solar forum, but if I can put the plug in for lithium, lithium is expensive. Lithium batteries are, but when you talk about how long lithium batteries last in cycles, typically 6,000 cycles, compare that to how long lead batteries last in cycles, which is usually 800 cycles globally, but in the RV industry, it's more like 500 cycles. You can get one lithium battery bank to outlast 5 banks of lead batteries. So lithium, in the cost of ownership, if you plan on keeping this system for a long time, is actually cheaper. It's just a harder check to write in the first place.
Right, it's more upfront cost.
And I'll not to dwell on this too long. I know we have a lot of questions, but very briefly, lithium versus AGM or flooded lead acid batteries is primarily a quality of life issue for everyone out there who. If you have the budget and you want high quality of life, I will tell you that we hear and have experienced battery anxiety. Battery anxiety. Every RVer knows, even boaters know about battery anxiety because you watch that level drop, and when you hit 50%, oh no, I got to run the generator. That vanishes. We don't think about it. It's really awesome.
So I've got a few people who are asking, Richard's asking on YouTube, and we had a question that came in from Bud ahead of time on the RVgeeks.com. So a question for Wes and Don. Somebody is looking to build a very large system, but they don't have the budget to build it all up front, and they don't want to skimp on quality. So they want to get a high quality system, but they're going to have to do it over time. Are there certain pieces they can start with? What would you recommend as a minimum, as a starting point that they can add on later?
Do you want to take that one, Wes?
Punt.
I could go on for 10 minutes.
Yeah. I can start, and Don, feel free to jump in. Yeah, absolutely. Solar is not a cheap upfront investment, and you can, as the RV Geeks mentioned, you can, if you want to future-proof, you can start with the charge controller rather than having to replace your charge controller with a bigger one as you're expanding your system. So you can always add solar panels to your charge controller, but as opposed to adding solar panels and your charge controller is too small, and then you have to replace that charge controller with a bigger one. So definitely, I would start looking at maybe the charge controller first and start with a couple panels, and then be able to add panels as your system gets bigger, right? So that would be my recommendation for a start.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Start with your MPPT panels because they're easier to expand large, but yet they'll still work as a smaller system. But the other thing is always go with the latest and greatest technology of solar panels. You get the PERC cells, get the monocrystalline panels, because we're right now at the leading edge of that technology. If this is going to take you 3-4 years, you're still relevant. You're still getting the best stuff. That means you pay a little more because it's new and emerging technology, but I think in the long term you end up happier.
Well, and I think as far as sizing it goes, we always recommend to people that actually one of the best small investments they can make prior to making a solar investment is to
BMK.
get some kind of a battery monitoring system like a Xantrex Link Pro or a Link Lite. Install that, put the shunt in line with your battery and your loads, and you can now start monitoring your actual power usage. So you can get a very accurate reading and a very accurate measurement instead of having to take some kind of a guesstimate saying, oh, well, I run my microwave for 10 minutes a day and that pulls this amount of power, and I run 4 lights that are this wattage, and all that kind of thing, where you're doing just a guesstimate on a napkin. A battery monitoring system like a Link Pro enables you to get a very accurate reading, and you know what your power usage is. And once you have that, then you can begin sizing your solar array in order to be replenishing that in a reasonable period of time.
Yeah, one of the reasons that we needed as large a solar system as we have is for my hair dryer.
Power hog.
Yeah.
So
is that a polisher?
Yes, it is.
That's right.
It generates a lot of heat.
It was for the buffer.
So a few people are asking now, can you elaborate a little bit more about how that battery monitor actually measures your usage?
It's like a flow gauge, basically.
Yeah.
It goes in line in the system, and it measures all of the electrons that flow into and out of the battery. So it basically sees how much you use. And
if you see them, the systems come with what's called a shunt, and it looks like a little metallic bridge with 2 terminals, one on each side. And you wire that in line with all of the ground cables coming back to the battery bank. So it may require a little bit of rewiring depending on how your battery bank is wired up. But you put that in line, and therefore it can now monitor the flow of all power in and out of the battery, and that's how it gives you a gauge. And it reports it to you. You can look at it as the total amp hours coming in and out of the battery, or you can actually just look at the percent state of charge. So it sort of flips the dime on it. Normally you think of how much power have I used. The battery monitoring kit like that would give you the availability of how much power is left. So
one of the most used features of the battery monitor too is the time to empty. So as you're using it, it'll give you in hours and minutes at your current state of discharge how long you should expect that battery to last before it needs to get charged. So as you're using it through the day, you can look at it and say, okay, it's 4 hours to bedtime. This thing says I've got 6 hours to dead. I might want to start my generator now and charge it up. But it gets you getting used to what your charge cycles look like during the day.
Yeah, right. And it's a relatively inexpensive installation and upfront cost to get some very valuable information about your usage.
Right. And there are other ways to do that as well. There's a device that plugs into the wall that you can plug into a regular 120 volt outlet and plug in, and we have one up there. What's that called again?
The kilowatt. That works for your 110 volt appliances. But again, the advantage of installing something like a Link Pro is it's managing all of the flow in and out of the battery. So whether you're pulling 12 volt power from your lights or your fan, or you're pulling 110 volt power from an inverter powering your microwave or your TV, all that power flows through it. So you get a total picture.
Right. But you also, and as part of this entire boondocking, and again, for those who are not familiar with the term boondocking, that means camping out off the grid without being connected to utilities. If you're a boondocker, there are things you do when it comes to power and water as a result. And one of those things that you do when it comes to power is you alter your practices. Like maybe you will tend to go to bed closer to when the sun goes down and get up closer to when the sun rises to avoid having to use your lights more.
Power management becomes an issue.
You'll all of the lights in our RV, if you've seen our YouTube channel, we use LED lights. We've been talking about M4 LEDs for years that we use their bulbs, and our entire RV is equipped with M4 LEDs because that reduces the amount of power. And there's another advantage to those as well. It reduces the heat output. So while we're sitting here today and it's quite warm with lights on us, they're all LED and they put out virtually no heat. So those sorts,
a win-win.
Yeah, those sorts of adjustments, it's more than just your solar and your power, but it's your management and your habits.
So we have a few people watching, and this question's come up a couple times now. They found it very difficult, and they're not sure who to trust when it comes to getting the installation done. So what kind of recommendations could you make so they could vet whoever they would like to get the installation done?
I would start with, so if you go to Xantrex.com, if I can plug our website, too late.
Don't forget Xantrex.com.
Yeah. Did I mention Xantrex.com? And you go to support and authorized service centers. Not all of our authorized service centers do installations, but a lot of them do. And they've already been vetted by us. And so that's a good place to start. If you do come across an authorized service center that's near you that doesn't do installations, ask them for a recommendation. The folks that we do business with are we consider them honorable, I think.
They're plugged in too.
They are plugged in, and I'll give another broader way of doing it that is actually good for many types, almost any type of RV information, and that is the user forums at irv2.com. There are owners forums for very specific brands of RVs, for specific topics. If you were to go to
you can ask for your area.
Sure. If you were to go to there are tons of forums and discussion panels at IRV2 about solar as a huge topic, about lithium batteries as a huge topic. So if you're looking for an installer, it's free to sign up at IRV2 to join the forums and to post questions. And you can say, hey, I see that somebody here, Iggy is in the Elkhart area. Hi, Iggy.
There surely has to be a reliable
Yes.
installer in the Elkhart
And
area.
or he said maybe in the
Are you
Elkhart.
sidelining?
I don't know that Iggy's saying he lives there, but he's mentioning the Elkhart area as a possible place to go. If you were to go in and post a question on the forums or look through the forums and say, I'm looking for a qualified, trusted solar installer in my area, whether it's the Pacific Northwest or Elkhart or Florida or wherever you might be,
feedback from people who may have had experience,
and get references and testimonials from people who've actually used it, and get IRV2 forums, great.
You can
place
use that
to
as
go.
the fallback if there's not a Xantrex authorized installer in your immediate area.
Right.
And there is one in Elkhart, by the way, or south of Elkhart.
I figured.
Within driving distance?
Pretty close.
Okay.
I also want to mention that I think it's important to also use a good installer, because you're dealing with an electrical system. Solar is electric, and at higher voltages you can actually hurt yourself. And so you're definitely working with a qualified installer who understands how to wire things together and connect solar panels together. That also passes the risk of installation if anything goes wrong to them, as opposed to doing it yourself.
Yep.
And then you could easily hurt yourself if you don't.
I'm glad you brought that up, Wes. So we are DIY guys. We do most of our work ourselves. We did our entire solar installation ourselves. That has a caveat to it. You have to have a confidence level in whatever area that you are working on. So as Wes said, there are risks involved. Even with a 12-volt system, you can get a shock if you're not comfortable working with electric power and have a particularly a good comfort level with that. You want to turn to a qualified installer, a professional, or you want to bring in someone to help you who does have confidence and competence in that area.
Right.
So we had an interesting question come in on YouTube, and that is somebody has a trailer that's currently equipped with solar, and they also have a van that they would like to equip with solar. Is there a way to use those two individual systems together when they're using the van to tow the trailer?
Interesting.
In other words, they want to have one set of panels that they can use on either one?
No, I think they want to have panels on both.
They have two individual systems. Is there a way to loop them together when they're close?
So I'm assuming the van has a house battery bank that they're feeding with solar. So if we go off that assumption, the problem with joining the two, you can do it, but if you join them when they're at different states of charge, then one battery will end up dumping into the other one, and then they'll come up fairly evenly. You just want to make sure that whatever you use to connect the two can handle that current dump. You need to worry about resistances between the two and things like that. So I would have an electrician do that for sure, just to make sure that you don't. I mean, it's doable, but I wouldn't consider that a backyard DIY project.
Okay, and the person who asked that question is saying, yes, you've answered my question exactly. Obviously, the assumptions we made were within the proper parameters.
It sounds like you should just be able to run an extension cord and just plug the two together,
I see that
right?
was from Diesel Max. Thank you, Max, for that question.
Right. Now, if you have an 11-year-old, you could have him hold both ends of the system, right?
Are we going?
Who among us has an 11-year-old?
Moving right along. There's Phil.
Grandkid, right?
Sorry.
Are you volunteering, Don?
There's a question from Phil on YouTube, and I'm going to have to read this one because it's got some good details. He's building a 600-watt ground array solar system for his fifth wheel, and he's wondering if there would be a downside to simply running a line from the inverter's AC output to the RV's 50-amp receptacle using the appropriate dog bones to go from 120-volt to the 30-amp and then to the 50-amp cable. He says, I realize I only have 120 volts in the RV, and I'll need to shut off the RV's converter. I've done this with my generator before, and it worked. But for now, I'd like to avoid wiring the inverter's output to the RV's distribution panel.
Right. There's not anything really wrong with that. You can do it that way. You want to make sure you turn off the converter, because one of the most common questions I get is, if I've got a converter, I'm charging the batteries, and then take that to an inverter that feeds the converter and charges the battery. That kind of round robin doesn't work. With inefficiencies, you end up with a dead battery bank. But it's doable. One of the benefits of hardwiring an inverter, specifically an inverter charger in a system, is you get benefits like power share, single point of connectivity with the inverter and the charger. But if you've got a standalone inverter, you just want to run your system at a lower rate, turn off your converter, connect the inverter to the batteries, dog bone down to what you can plug into the inverter. It's doable. There's nothing wrong with that. Just don't leave it outside if it's raining.
And I want to interject briefly that you'll notice that there are many questions and discussion that always gets back to batteries, and it's a very common question we hear about is why you're always talking about solar and batteries all in the same thing. Is it all the same system? And it's actually two sides of the same coin. You can picture the battery bank like your fuel tank in your vehicle.
Storage.
And that's your storage. And you could picture your solar panels like the fuel pump at the gas station. And sometimes you go to the regular fuel pump, or if you have a diesel, maybe you go over to the truck side with that high-speed pump where it really pours the power in. And having a big solar bank is like having a high-speed pump at the diesel island at the truck stop. And having a large battery bank is like having a large fuel tank on board your rig. So those two are not exactly the same, and you can have one without the other, but they really do go together. And I want to mention also in relation to that so when many of the videos that people may have seen on our channel kind of get the two kind of mixed up together whenever we talk about our installation of our Xantrex Freedom eGen lithium battery bank. We have a 600 amp hour Xantrex battery. We always kind of talk about solar at the same time. And when we talked about installing our solar panels through Xantrex, also going through our Xantrex inverter charger, it's all part of the same system feeding along the line with the inverter charger in between and the fuel pump solar panels on one end and the fuel tank battery at the other end. And you'll see the same thing when you, on June 13th, again, just to make a little plug here, when Xantrex makes its debut appearance on the RVers TV show on the Discovery Channel Saturday after next, June 13th. John and I will be hosting that, but we're mostly talking about solar, but it ties into the batteries as well. It really all is
interrelated.
One interrelated system.
We've got a question from Shami on YouTube, and this one's for Wes. How well will RV solar work in Alaska during the dark winter months?
I have to ask Wes, have you ever been to Alaska during the dark winter months? I'm curious.
I have. Well, British Columbia, there's many cruise ships that go along the Alaska coastline, and it's a beautiful state and beautiful glaciers that you can see. So I love Alaska, and it's not too far away. But to answer, is it Shami's question?
Yeah.
It doesn't work well. Obviously, solar is highly dependent on your geographical location. If you're in very sunny states like California and Arizona, you'll have sun all year round, and you'll perform. You'll get solar all year round. But if you're in Alaska, there's very few months where you get many hours of peak solar, and certainly that has a major effect on the amount of solar panels that you need to compensate for the lack of sun. So to answer your question, no, it doesn't work that well in Alaska.
And Alaska also has the double whammy of not only do you have the issue of wintertime with limited numbers of daylight hours if you even get any, but also the fact that even during the normal sunlight hours that the sun is not as high in the sky, so you've got a larger angle to the solar panels, so they're not necessarily as efficient as if the sun was right overhead.
Basically, the closer you are to the equator, the better sun is going to be, and the further you are from the equator, the better solar is going to be, rather. And the further you are,
satellite.
Yes, it's the same thing with satellite. We used to have an internet satellite dish, and when we would come to Canada, it was aiming down at the horizon instead of up into the sky. And it's the same thing. And of course, the environment that you're in, is it a predominantly sunny environment?
Or forested.
Or is it a predominantly cloudy environment? So all winter long, you have a double whammy here in British Columbia. And in Washington State, the Pacific Northwest, you have a low sun, short daylight hours, a lot of trees, and a lot of clouds. And it is not conducive the way it would be if you were in the desert Southwest, of course.
And
Mount them on a
Chami
balloon.
is watching with us and
Oh, great.
says, thank you for being so honest, because we could have said, oh, yes, they're great. You should go buy some. But
No. Chami, if you were,
yes, they're great. Go buy a lot of them. Is what
Chami,
the
I'm
answer really
going
ends up being.
to be honest. We'll be honest with you the way I was to that gentleman who asked if he should buy solar panels and lithium batteries to stay at his RV resort all year round. The answer is no.
So, Wes, another question for you just came in. Is the Xantrex battery that Peter and John referred to available to the public?
I believe that's right now the Xantrex lithium battery is only available to OEMs. And Don, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, we're actually working with some of our authorized service centers to be able to do installations with the cell, just because lithium, you want to be careful, so you want to do it right. But keep in touch with us and call our tech support line. We can probably help get you connected to a battery with one of our service centers.
Yes,
and as I say, one of the key things that we really appreciate about the way Xantrex has been approaching this with the lithium batteries is, again, there are a lot of drop-in replacement solutions out there, and they do work. They've got BMSs built into them, and they're very well engineered. But more often than not, there's more to it than just the replacement of the battery itself. So there's variables with your inverter charger and whether or not that can be programmed to work with lithium. Our RV has a unique system, a bird system that connects the alternator to the house batteries when we're driving, and that posed some challenges because of the differences in the charge profiles. So there are a lot of factors and variables involved, and so Xantrex is taking it cautiously as far as making this, available to the consumer public because of those factors.
And if I can mention also that I see that Xiaomi said that she'd buy the panels, rather the battery, and have Xantrex do the installation. So some of that is going to depend on, as Wes and Don were talking about, authorized installers. So we did not install our own Xantrex Freedom eGen lithium battery. That was done by a company who is an authorized installer called Pacific Yacht Systems here in Vancouver, British Columbia. There are other authorized installers, and if you would like to have
on a case-by-case
a
basis,
Freedom eGen lithium battery, which we absolutely love and highly recommend, if you would like to have that installed in your RV, please use the Xantrex Facebook page to reach out to Xantrex, let them know you're interested, and they can connect you with an authorized installer if not in your area, in an area that you can go to.
RVgeeks, James is asking on YouTube, it seems that switching to lithium batteries is a plus. Do you also have to change an older 2000 watt pure sine wave inverter charger, or can it be programmed for lithium ion and solar? What about lead acid chassis batteries and charging?
Yeah,
it depends.
Yeah, it depends. So if the older inverter charger, depending on how old it is, probably it's not going to treat that lithium battery very well. Some of the older inverter chargers had custom battery charge algorithms that you can kind of put the right numbers in and make it work. The most of the modern ones, at least the ones in the last 5 or 10 years, have custom settings or at least a lithium setting. But one of the things to remember is, even if you do it wrong, a quality lithium battery will protect itself.
Nice.
I don't want to discourage you from saying, I'm not going to get a lithium battery, but if you put in a lithium battery and you're using an older inverter charger and your battery temporarily stops working because it's trying to protect itself against an overcharge or something like that, that's going to be the nature of the beast, and you can maybe you can do something with your charging system down the road, but yeah, it'll take care of itself. It's not going to let you damage it.
And as far as sort of the disparity then between a lithium house bank and potentially a flooded lead acid or an AGM engine starting battery, yes, you do have some issues there as far as the different charging profiles for the two different battery chemistries. So the way it was handled in our install was that we basically separated the two. So our existing inverter charger, our Xantrex Freedom, handles the charging of the lithium battery, and it's programmed with the correct profile in order to do that as efficiently as possible. And then we installed a separate dedicated charger that has an AGM profile to charge our chassis battery. And then that way, when we're on shore power, the two separate chargers handle the two separate battery banks.
And John can say we, meaning because we were there kind of helping with the
watched.
installation, learning from Pacific Yacht Systems.
That one other way to also tackle that problem can be to use a DC to DC converter in order to basically take the charging profile from the lithium battery and convert that to an acceptable profile for the chassis batteries, basically bleeding some charge power off to charge the chassis.
Our original inverter charger that came on our RV, it was not a Xantrex unit, it was a different brand. It failed, and the first change we made in our system on this rig was actually to switch to a Xantrex Freedom SW 3000 watt inverter charger. And the reason we did that was because we had our Bounder diesel, our original rig, came from the factory with a Xantrex inverter charger. We had no problem with it. We were very happy with it. Xantrex's reputation preceded itself, and we said, well, if we're going to put a new inverter charger in to replace a failed one, we're going to do that. And it turned out to be a good idea later on, because that was a couple of years prior to our installing our lithium battery. And
just
of course,
compatibility.
Of course, the Xantrex Freedom SW 3000 was compatible.
So a question came in from YouTube, and the question is, how do you know when you should use parallel wiring versus series wiring?
What a fantastic question.
Yeah.
I can take that one.
Yes.
Great.
Yes, that's a great question, and it's a question we get a lot, series or parallel. There's actually a third option. You can actually do a combination of both to get the benefits of both.
I'm so glad you said that.
To get the benefits of both series and parallel, because it's not like one particular configuration has all the advantages. So briefly, when you wire panels in series, your solar array voltage is higher. When you wire panels in parallel, your current rises. So it does the opposite effect. So briefly, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but one advantage of a parallel configuration is that you have parallel configurators better protect against shading performance because there's multiple paths to get from the solar panel to the charge controller if one panel is shaded. With a series configuration, Don kind of touched on that earlier, you get the advantages of being able to convert those higher voltages. You get you have smaller currents going through your solar array, which means you have smaller gauge wire that you can use, and smaller gauge wire, of course, is lower cost. Another consideration for series over parallel is that series tends to be simpler in the way that it's wired, whereas parallel tends to have more equipment, it's more complex in its wiring, and so series tends to be simpler and a lower cost system of install. And then, of course, probably the biggest factor to choose series or parallel is really the type of charge controller that you're going to use. So if you're using a PWM, I really only recommend using a parallel configurations to minimize those a high voltage in your solar array, and then minimizing those losses that Don touched on earlier. If you're using an MPPT, you can actually use all three: series, parallel, series, and a combination of both. But you really want to be shifting towards using series as much as possible for an MPPT to maximize efficiency. So there's a lot of factors. I can't really give you a black and white answer, but certainly that gives you some idea of when you should use series and when you should use parallel.
Yeah, I think that Wes touched on so many of the important things. The gauge of wire that you use, which is not only a cost issue, but an ease of installation issue, because using 10 gauge wire, which is what we use to run our series, which is very common, versus 6 gauge wire, which is much heavier, which is what we've run from our combiner box on the roof down to the batteries, to the charge controllers. It's much easier to work with and much less expensive. And I was so glad that you mentioned, Wes, series, parallel, combined, because that's exactly what we have done.
Well, ours is a little bit of a Frankenstein, because typically you would, basically if you had 6 panels, you could do 2 in series, paralleled with a second pair in series, paralleled with a second pair in series, and effectively get some of the benefits of both scenarios.
We've done something a little different.
And then that would be feeding into your charge controller that way, so you can basically separate them out. Ours is paralleled further downstream. It's actually paralleled beyond the solar charge controllers, which is sort of cheating. But
yeah, what we've done with ours is, because we've done something a little unusual, we have 2 completely different types of panels, And even though their output is about the same, our rigid panels put out 160 watts and our flex panels put out 165. Close enough that we could have put them all in line together and made one big series if we wanted to.
Yeah, that is actually one of the nice features of the two different styles of panels that Xantrex offers, which is the fact that their charging characteristics, their output characteristics are very similar.
Which means you can mix them without really causing a degradation.
Voltages and amperages are very close.
So what we've done is we've taken our 4 rigid Xantrex panels and wired them in series. And if you want to see a diagram of that, if you go to our YouTube channel and go to our fairly recent, the Ultimate Solar System, the Ultimate Solar Panel System, which is on our channel, you'll see that John did a fairly extensive walkthrough of how our system is set up. And there's a diagram in there that explained the series, where you basically take the positive lead from each panel and lead it to the negative side of the other panel.
It's like daisy chaining them
You
together.
daisy chain them all together in one big loop.
Effectively creating one giant solar panel.
Right, so we took all of the rigid panels and put them plus to minus, plus to minus, plus to minus, and made a loop. And then we did the same thing with the flexible panels, and then put those together in parallel down at the solar controllers. We went into each individual solar controller as one series and another series, and then the two lead independently into the system. So we basically have two separate
We like to call it
solar.
a series parallel.
We call it series parallel, but it's a little different than standard.
But it gives us the advantage that then each of the panels, because some of them are flat and some of them are tilted on occasion, it gives the charge controllers the ability to optimize their configuration. The MPPT can optimize for the conditions of each array, and so it makes it more efficient.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in. There's a couple actually other benefits of a series parallel configuration. So for example, if you had a 30 amp MPPT charge controller, you can only wire 3 maybe 100 watt solar panels in series. But if you do a series parallel, you can actually add 400 watts instead of 300 watts, 2 100 watt panels in series, and then another 2 100 watt panels in series. So you get 400 watts of your system, because a charge controller always has voltage limitations. So when you wire panels in series, there's only so many you can wire in series before that voltage limitation is exceeded. So you can get more out of your solar panel. You can have a bigger solar panel array with a series parallel configuration. And the other consideration, and John, you touched on it, was anytime you do series parallel configurations, you want to make sure it's a balanced system. So you want to have, so if in John's example, if you have 6 panels, 2, 2, 2, and you don't want to have 2, 2, 1 or 1, 2, 2, right? You want to make sure that every string, so a string is a number of solar panels wired in series is called a string. So you want to make sure each string has the equal number of solar panels and of the same type. So you want to make sure that the system is evenly balanced. Otherwise, it's not going to work well.
We had a question come in for Don, and this is from Vit, and he left this question on the RVgeeks.com. He says, we have a diesel pusher with 3 house batteries and no real space for more, a modified sine wave inverter, and no solar. We installed a residential fridge a couple years ago and would like to upgrade to a true sine wave inverter, add some solar, mostly for the fridge, and improve the house battery capacity. I'd like to hire someone to engineer and install a system. Do you have any suggestions in Texas or Houston or Gulf Coast area?
Yeah, I would recommend you to do what we said earlier. If you go to Xantrex, in fact, if I look at it, you go to contacts, authorized service centers. If I click the South area, I have one in Houston and one in Louisville, Texas. So, just see who we've already kind of recommended to work with. Some do installations, some don't. All of them deal with our products, but give them a call, see what if they do. If they don't, they know somebody who does.
Yeah.
So.
Great.
This last question that we had before the show, so if anybody has any other questions, we've got a few more happening in the comments live. So leave your question now in the comments. Now's the time. We had one more that came in before the show. This one's for Wes. Ravel on the RVgeeks.com says, we're looking at a newer fifth wheel with a residential style refrigerator. We do boondock periodically for 3 to 5 days at a time. I don't think the batteries will last that long, so solar appears to be a good option. And some newer RVs have a solar connector on the side, which I assume is for purpose of charging the batteries. What options do I have without mounting solar panels on the roof for a few times a year that we boondock?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. The answer to that is portable kits. Portable kits. There's a lot of RVs out there that have this pre-wired for solar automobile SAE sidewall port. And so that allows for easy plug-and-play connection for portable kits to so a portable case is like a briefcase that opens and folds into a solar panel. And then the advantage of a portable kit as opposed to installing a solar panel mounted on your roof is, for one thing, there's no installation involved and you just plug and play. And the other advantage is if you really want to park your RV in the shade and keep it cool, and rather than you can still get solar charging by running a portable kit in the sunny part next to the tree, for example. And so that you can still get solar power and charge your batteries while keeping your RV cool inside the shade. So portable kits have its place. The downside with portable kits is obviously it's limited in its size. You know, they come in typically 100 watts, maybe 160, maybe a little bit bigger. So you're not going to generate a ton of power and a ton of to charge your batteries, but you'll generate something, and maybe that's enough to top off your batteries and maintain it. So, there's definitely, I think portable kits would be the answer to your question.
So is it possible that portable kits have enough substantial power to run a residential refrigerator, or is it just slowing the drain on the battery?
I think slowing the drain, yeah. So it's not going to, residential refrigerator would probably consume more power than your solar panel could generate.
It will depend on the size of the refrigerator. We definitely had that experience as well. So we went from an RV refrigerator to a residential refrigerator, and it is,
that's true. Yeah.
Without a doubt, the single largest power consumer on our RV.
Yeah. I have to say that we really do love having a residential refrigerator. There are many benefits. It keeps the ice cream frozen hard. You don't need to defrost. That's the most important thing.
Of course. Everyone worries about the hardness of their ice cream.
It doesn't need defrosting. It's large and can fit lots of stuff in it. However, if we were hardcore, serious, ultimate boondockers who wanted to make the ultimate boondocking rig, residential refrigerators are not as compatible with that.
No.
It's a fact.
So we have a fairly large one. It's a 17 cubic foot. So prior to our current 1,300 watts of Xantrex system, we had a much smaller system with just a standard 4 battery.
We had 4 AGM batteries,
6-volt deep cycle series parallel battery arrangement, and with only 375 watts of solar on the roof, tiltable even, it would have a hard time, keeping us up. It had to be very sunny, very continuously for it to keep ahead of the power demand for the refrigerator. And that's not accounting for any other power we may want to consume. So water pump, furnace blower, vent fans, whatever. So it definitely was not. We ended up having to run our generator every other day, maybe every third day, depending on the weather pattern.
And now we hardly run it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as it's sunny out.
It sounds like from their description, they may run into the problem that their batteries may not be they have enough capacity to store enough power to even keep that refrigerator running overnight successfully, let alone have enough then solar to replenish that during the course of the day. So maybe an issue.
And I see we're over our allotted hour, but I hope that since lots of people are still here, we can hang a few more minutes. But as we're starting to wind down, I just want to mention a couple of things I just happened to notice in the chat. Somebody asked if we wish that all of our panels were tiltable. I wouldn't say so. I think that for us, we like the idea of having different options and experimenting with different technologies. And also the fact is that our roof would not accept all tiltable panels. And if you want to know why, right now, I'm going to just drop something, a little self-serving thing in the self-promotion. I just put a link just now into the video description. In the chat. Don't go watch that
YouTube,
right now.
So if you're watching on Facebook, it's over on YouTube.
I apologize. If you're watching on Facebook, you won't see that. But I just put a link that you can watch later in the chat. It is a link to our ultimate 1,300 watt RV solar system. And if you're watching on Facebook, just go to our YouTube channel. You'll see that there. It was a recent post. John explains why we couldn't tilt all of our panels. It has to do with the things that are on our roof, like roof vents and fans and air conditioners, the things that are in the way. You can't take a bunch of panels and put them together and tilt them because one will shadow the other ones. They have to be far apart. And because of the way our roof is laid out, we couldn't have tilted all 8 of our panels anyway. And that's why we decided to go with the flexibles, and it made a lot of sense for us.
And we've actually been appreciating the opportunity to sort of compare the two different technologies as well. So the rigid, typical standard glass panels compared to the, semi-rigid flexible panels, we do see differences in their performance. So the semi-rigid panels actually perform better in low light and low light angle conditions than the glass panels do. And so we are seeing that, in those situations later in the afternoon when if the panels are not tilted, if we're not facing the correct direction to tilt them to face the sun, then we're actually getting better output from the flexible panels. And same thing on sort of overcast, cloudy days, the flex panels are actually outperforming the rigid. So we're getting, and I think I'm really happy with the sort of the compromises and the end result of the system, having the both, because we're getting the best of both worlds without adding all the extra weight.
They were also, they weighed less. They were incredibly easy to install.
Yeah.
They didn't put any holes in the roof. There are still a lot of advantages. And I want to mention that Wes mentioned that while glass panels have a proven long-term durability, these new panels from Xantrex are more robust, again, than any other flexibles we've seen. And also, we've had ours on for about a year now. They look exactly like the day we put them on. We don't drag them under trees. We don't walk on them. They look exactly like we just put them on. And I can't imagine they're not going to last a good long time.
Yeah.
We've got another question from Howard, and he's wondering, in a multi-panel system, is there a way to monitor each panel to find out if one of them were to fail?
Do you have, Don or Wes, do you have to just unplug them and put a meter on them?
Yeah, they'll have an open circuit voltage. So if you've got sun shining on them, you could just pull it and measure the voltage there. You should see, your whatever the open circuit voltage is on the spec sheet. Yeah,
and then I assume if there was damage to the panel, you would see a lower voltage than was reported.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I would agree. Yeah.
I also see that there are people, I see that someone from Xantrex, I assume that someone is in the office, who's posting, which we appreciate very much. And someone asked if a link to the Xantrex Facebook page could be put up, and a website link, and if that's possible, that could be done, just to make sure that if people are watching on YouTube and want to get to the Xantrex Facebook page or website, if a link to that could be tossed up there, that would be wonderful.
So I'm getting a few more questions that are coming in about where should I start as a bare minimum with solar. Somebody's talking about they're just making a single trip, so they don't want to invest a large amount because they just need it for that short trip. Or some people saying, we just want it for 1 or 2 days at a time. I know we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but maybe one last time we could cap off what is kind of a starting point for a decent quality system.
Yeah, I would start with 2 panels and an MPPT solar controller. That gives you the expandability, 2 panels, because if you tie them in series, you get that natural benefit with the MPPTs. And then see how your usage goes, see how your battery performs. Yep. And then with something like that, you'll want to know where you got the panels from, because when you add a third panel, you'll want one that's exactly like the other 2, because you're running them in the chain. And then watch how your performance changes, and then that can kind of give you a baseline of what you want to do next.
I'd also like to mention that one thing you can take into consideration. So a question we get is that, should I get solar panels and a higher end battery at all? And I would say that the first thing to look at is how much are you going to be off the grid. If you are a part-timer and you go out for weekends 2 or 3 times a year, or you go for a 1-week trip a year, I'd suggest that while yes, you can get solar panels and they're wonderful to have, you also can potentially, depending on your budget, you could consider foregoing it and going with a small portable generator for those occasional times. If you have really, really minimal usage. if you would like to do, I would say the more often and the more you would like to stay off the grid, the more interested you are in the peace and quiet and silence and quality of life that solar panels bring. Those are the decisions you make as to when you're going to begin with solar. And then you would go to what Don said. Start with a couple of 100-watt panels and an MPPT controller. Make sure it's expandable and go from there.
Or even possibly, again, what we were talking about earlier when Wes was talking about the portable kits. So it could depend on your RV. If you already have the port available on the side for plugging in a solar array, it may be easiest for you to start with a portable and not have to have the expense of an installation and a bigger arrangement. But again, it's going to depend on your needs and your travel style.
Well, that is all the questions that have come in from YouTube and Facebook, and we also answered plenty of questions that came in ahead of time. Guys, any thoughts that we didn't touch on or anything that you think might be valuable to our viewers tonight?
I'm going to toss one out there real quick. This is a purely promotional plug for anyone who came late. If you've come in from some of the publicity that's been out in like RV Business or the Xantrex Facebook page, and you haven't visited the RVgeeks YouTube channel, we encourage you to do so. John and I have been full-time RVers for 17 years last month, and we have been making videos since 2011, primarily around DIY, how-to. We feature all sorts of tips on how to use and maintain your systems, how to deal with all sorts of things, to install and repair and upgrade. We talk about many high-quality products that we personally use and love. And also, in case you're not aware of it, John and I are the co-hosts and co-executive producers of a TV show called The RVers that airs on the Discovery Channel and PBS, iTunes, Google Play. Where else is it, Adam?
Roads TV.
Fun Roads TV and other streaming services. The show is currently in its second season on Discovery. And since you're here interested in solar, I'm excited to mention again that on June 13th, episode 4 of season 2 is going to air on the Discovery Channel at 8 o'clock Eastern and Pacific, 7 a.m. Central, 9 a.m. Mountain Time on the Discovery Channel, where John and I will talk about our new 1,300-watt Xantrex solar system. I say new, it's about a year old now.
Still new to us.
New to us. And we will be at the Xantrex facility talking more about this. That is going to air on Discovery, again, Saturday morning, June 13th, episode 4. So we hope you can be there. And Adam, again, who was with us, if you missed in the beginning, is the host of the online face of the RVers TV on Facebook and their YouTube channel. And Adam and his wife and their 3 boys travel full-time in their travel trailer. If you want to see how they're doing an incredible job on renovating their brand new, to them, what year is it, Adam? Your new travel trailer? Upgraded from a 2002, right?
No, from a 1992.
Excuse me, I got the wrong 2 there. What was I thinking?
You missed a decade or 2 there.
Yeah, so Adam and his family are online. You can see behind-the-scenes things on the RVers TV channel and their Facebook page. And also, of course, Xantrex's channel on YouTube has behind-the-scenes things with John and myself where we talk about our system and many other informative videos.
Lots of Tech Doctor content from Don.
Yes.
Well, that's what I was going to end with, a plug for the Tech Doctor. That's where I got my alter ego's name. If you go to the Xantrex website, go to I think it's support, and then Tech Doctor. There's a series of articles and videos. There's 2 rules we follow in the Tech Doctor program. First, we cover the technical subjects without talking technical. We try to make it easy to understand for the layman. The second thing is we don't talk about Xantrex product. This isn't something to try to sell you something that we make. It's just good, honest information. We've got troubleshooting tips. We've got different sources of power and what they mean, the differences between modified sine wave, true sine wave inverters, and things like that. So check those out. And if you go to the video channel, which is on our YouTube channel, a lot of those videos have been dubbed in Spanish and French too. So.
Excellent.
Well, I want to thank everyone, and I particularly want to thank Wes and Adam for coming in a little bit at the last minute. We were speaking with Wes, and him being the product manager for Xantrex Solar, we felt that having Wesley here would be extremely beneficial. And Wesley, I want to thank you for adding all that you have. And Don, of course, thank you for being here with us again. And Adam, out of the blue, coming in to help host and curate questions for us. Thank you so much.
And of course, we want to thank everybody who participated both before the live, leaving us questions, and hopefully we were able to answer those for you. And all of you who participated live with us this evening, and all of the questions you fed in, thank you so much. If we didn't get to your question, please feel free to leave it as a comment on either YouTube or on Facebook. So either on Xantrex's Facebook post about this video or on YouTube where we posted about this, and we will do our best to try and get an answer for you as quickly as we can.
And thank you all out there for joining us tonight.
Yes.
Everyone stay safe. We hope to see you on the road this summer. Adam, if we haven't left anything out.
No, I think it's time for us all to say goodnight.
Excellent. Thank you so much,